All right, looks like we are live. Let's talk about the LSAT writing sample and why it actually matters now, especially in 2026. Because this is the thing that no one really explains to you. Most people hear that the writing sample is unscored, and they immediately translate that as thinking the writing sample is unimportant. But that's not how law schools think. And it's definitely not how admissions committees work behind the scenes. So today, I'm going to share exactly what happens when someone reads your application. First off, the writing sample is one of the very first things they see. When your file's opened, whether it's a top 14 law school or your local state school, your writing sample is right there, side by side with your personal statement, your resume, your LSAT score, and your transcripts. They're not waiting till the end to look at your writing sample. They're not saying, we'll read it later. It's there on the first screen. And it gets read, especially if the rest of your writing looks suspiciously perfect. Which leads me to the next point. The writing sample is how they figure out if you're the one who wrote your application essays. Admissions officers aren't stupid. They know that people help. They know that your friends could help edit your personal statement. They know that you could be running everything through Grammarly, or maybe you're using ChatGPT and asking it to make this sound better. They assume all of that. So they're looking for inconsistencies in your writing style. They're not reading it for your brilliance. They want to see does it match the voice, the tone, and the fluency of your application essays. They want to see if it's the same person who wrote both, or does it look like a totally different person wrote it? Because if your personal statement is this smooth, flowing, beautifully crafted narrative, and your writing sample reads like a rushed email with half-formed sentences, that's going to be a major red flag. Of course, it doesn't mean they're going to throw out your entire file, but it will raise some questions. It will plant some seeds of doubt. And that seed of doubt could grow into real hesitation when they're deciding between you and someone else who sounds consistent across the board. Law schools also use your writing sample to evaluate your actual writing ability in the moment because the writing sample is the only example that shows how you perform without help in real time under timed conditions. Because they know that the writing sample, nobody else is editing it. You don't get to revise it. You can't hit undo. It's just you and the keyboard in real time under timed conditions. And so when we work with students who are non-native English speakers, or even just people who haven't written an essay in years, the writing sample is the best place to look for quick improvement because it's not about being fancy. It's just basic structure, clear sentences, logical thinking in the moment. And the writing sample is also becoming more important because LSAC is watching also. They're planning to score the writing sample sometime in the next couple years. They're piloting rubrics and testing essay scoring systems. It's not scored yet, but LSAC is laying the groundwork to score it maybe next year or the following year. And it's not crazy to imagine that law schools want the writing sample to be scored as AI gets better at faking polished essays. And so if you're applying to law school in 2026, your response could become part of the data LSAC uses to build that future scoring system. Now, let's say you've got a 170 LSAT score and a 3.8 GPA. You're going to be competitive for scholarships for the vast majority of law schools. Maybe not the T14, but for most of the others. And there are going to be hundreds of other applicants, if not thousands, who have similar stats. So the question becomes, who's going to thrive in the classroom? Who will represent the school well? Who can write well under pressure? And if you're the one who has a clean, confident writing sample, that could tip the scale in your favor. And it doesn't even have to be amazing, it just has to show that you're sharp and you don't fold under pressure. Admissions officers won't say this flat out, but of course it happens all the time. Now, if you blow off the writing sample, if you skip it, if you treat it like a joke, LSAC will flag it, and law schools will see that also. They're not just going to say, oh, well, it's unscored, we don't care. They're going to ask, does this person take deadlines seriously? Did they even read the instructions? Can we trust them to show up and do the work in law school? And so if you're careless now, that becomes a question of professionalism, and that is not the way that you want to be remembered. And so the writing sample is not just a formality, it's a chance to show law schools who you are without filters. It does not have to be your best self, but it is going to be your real self. And if your real self is thoughtful, clear, and composed, even if not perfect, that is still incredibly powerful given that they know it's being written under pressure. And admissions is not only about your stats. Of course, LSAT and GPA are the biggest factors, but every single signal that you send plays a role. Now, the writing sample has changed in the past few years, and so you don't want to use outdated prep materials. Back in the day, the writing sample was a very simple basic prompt where you had to choose between two options. For example, should a company open its new store on Pine Street or on Oak Street? Or should the city invest in a sports arena or a public park? It was that kind of thing. No real research, no source material. It was just pick one of two arbitrary options, list a couple of reasons why you picked your choice, and you're done. It's it. And it felt kind of like a filler task. It was a formality. And it felt that way because it was. You didn't need a whole lot of strategy. But LSAC threw that out the window back in 2024. They launched the new argumentative writing sample. And this one's a bit harder. It's a bit smarter. Instead of picking between two fake options, you've now got to take a position on a real world issue. Something broad, something messy, something that people actually argue about, like, for example, what's the real purpose of college? Or should people prioritize personal freedom or public safety? You're not making up your own reasons anymore. Now you're given a couple of short source blurbs, each offering a different perspective on the issue, kind of like mini opinion pieces. Some are strong, some are weak, some are provocative, and your job is to pick a stance, use the sources to support it, acknowledge the other side, push back on it, and do it all in under 35 minutes with no outside help. And you've got to sound like a human being with a functioning brain under pressure. You've got 15 minutes to plan, then 35 minutes to write. This is more like a 1L law school final than a writing sample, and that is by design because law schools aren't just testing whether you can write, they're testing whether you can argue under time pressure, whether you can process multiple viewpoints, choose your ground, and defend it like a mature adult. And that is honestly the whole game in law school. It's not about being right because the choice that you pick doesn't really matter. It's about how well you argue for what you have chosen. And so when we work with students, we always remind them this is not a test of personal opinion. Nobody really cares what you believe or which choice you pick. They care whether you can stake out a position and build something logical out of the pieces you've been given. And this is where strategy matters. You are also expected to reference the source material explicitly. If you write your whole essay without mentioning at least two sources by name, you're going to be in trouble because it'll look like you ignored the instructions. Or even worse, it'll look like you didn't even understand the instructions. And that would be signaling that you're not really ready for law school. Law school is arguing from given source material, not free writing from your gut. And so to summarize the differences from the old writing sample versus the new, you are no longer choosing between two easy options. You've got to form an opinion on a real issue. You're given 3 to 4 short sources to read and reference. You've got to argue your position, support it, and address the other side. And you do all of this in one clean, structured, readable essay that you write in 35 minutes under pressure. And the good news is, once you know how this works and you build a repeatable strategy, you are way ahead of the vast majority of applicants. Now, the goal here again is not to be brilliant, just to be one of the few who actually gets how this section works now and executes under pressure. Now, remember, you're not being judged like it's a high school English essay. There's no admissions officer with a red pen circling grammar mistakes and deducting points for not having a 5-paragraph structure. That is not how this works. They are not expecting brilliant writing. They're not looking for the next great legal philosopher, and they're not hoping that you solve the prompt once and forever. They are looking for 3 specific things. That is it. And once you understand what those 3 things are, the entire task becomes easier and much more strategic. The first thing you got to be able to show them is, can you write a clear, logical argument? That is the number 1 priority. They want to see that you can take a position and support it in a logical way. Not trying to cover every possible nuance, just make a point, choose a side, and stick with it. And so when you choose a side, you're not giving a 360-degree analysis of the entire issue. You've just got to say, here's my stance, here's why, and here's how I respond to the other side. You also want to keep the argument tight. You're not going to meander. You're not going to try to sound smart. You just want to be clear. I mean, you could have the most brilliant insight in the world, but if it's buried in 5 paragraphs of fluff or vague language, no one's going to find it. And if your essay feels scattered, like you're arguing 5 different things at once with no structure, they'll assume that's how you think under pressure, which is not great news for a law school applicant. The second thing you want to show is, can you write in fluent, readable English? This is not about being fancy. It's not about big words or long sentences. It's about showing that you can write in a way that is smooth, structured, and easy to follow, because law school is writing and legal work is also writing. So the writing sample becomes a kind of litmus test for whether you can produce clear, competent writing without anybody helping you, without AI. They want to see proper grammar and punctuation, clear transitions between ideas, sentences that don't run on forever, paragraphs that stick to one point at a time, and an overall flow that sounds like an actual human wrote it. And so when we work with students who feel rusty with their writing or they're not native English speakers, we don't try to make their writing fancy. We focus on making it clean, simple, and clear. You also want to show, and this is the third point, can you respond to the other side without losing control of your argument? This is the difference between someone who can think critically and someone who just states an opinion. Law schools want to see that you can acknowledge a competing view and still defend your position with composure. That is how legal arguments work in real life. Because when you're a lawyer, you're going to be up against opposing counsel. You'll get grilled in class when you're in law school. You will write memos where the other side actually has a point, and you'll need to push back without a meltdown. And so the writing sample, if you act like your side is the only valid viewpoint and you ignore the other side completely, that makes your argument feel one-dimensional and like you're lacking nuance. But if you can show that you understand the strongest argument against your position, and then you can explain why your stance still makes more sense, now you're showing your ability to reason under pressure. Now, here's what law schools are not looking for. They are not looking for the right answer to the prompt because there isn't one. They're not looking for perfect grammar because mistakes are fine. It's a first draft, but the writing just has to be readable. They're also not looking for genius level insight because no one's going to solve AI regulation in 35 minutes. And the essay does not need to be polished like it was written by your English professor. They just want to know, can you think clearly and express yourself under time pressure? If the answer is yes, even with basic, simple language, congrats, you've passed the test. Now here's where this gets real. If your personal statement is beautifully written, but your writing sample looks like it was slapped together in 5 minutes with half sentences and no structure, it doesn't just look inconsistent, it raises the question, did you even write your personal statement yourself? And that would be the worst case scenario. Not because your essay was bad, but because it creates doubt. However, if your writing sample is clear, if it's structured, if it's thoughtful, even if it's simple, then everything feels aligned and you come across like somebody who's ready for law school. And maybe you're right on the edge. Maybe your LSAT score is solid but not spectacular. Or maybe your GPA isn't perfect. A little boost in trust from your writing sample, it could be the thing that gets you in the door. Because the writing sample is really a credibility check. It's your chance to show that you've got the mindset, the discipline, and the control to succeed in law school when nobody is editing your work for you. Now, I've got some questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. If I don't get to yours right away, stick around. I will try to get to as many of these as I can over the next hour or so. Drushmu's asking, do the writing samples get recorded as part of the score? How are they factored? Who sees it? So at the moment in 2025, 2026, the writing sample is unscored currently. That could, of course, change. But for now, it's unscored. It is sent to law schools along with your LSAT score, and admissions officers can see it. And more, they are looking at your writing sample because they want to verify your true writing ability without friends, family, admissions consultants, or ChatGPT having the ability to help you with your essay. So the writing sample is the only unfiltered look they get at your true writing ability. In the future, of course, probably the next year or two, they probably will start scoring the writing sample, as they have alluded to. Law schools are pushing for a scored writing sample because, in part, of all the LSAT score inflation, and of course, as well, because of the potential for AI to have helped with your application essay. Jenny's asking, what would you say is the least difficult part of the exam? That's really a matter of opinion. It differs for each person. Some people, logical reasoning's easier. For some people, reading comprehension's easier. For some people, the writing sample's easier, of course, because the writing sample's unscored. It doesn't really matter as much as the scored portions. And logical reasoning and reading comp are quite similar to each other. I would say, all else being equal, it's probably easier for most people to improve at logical reasoning than reading comp, just because logical reasoning is less familiar to start with. And so there's more low-hanging fruit there, but just by getting basic familiarity with logical reasoning. And I recommend focusing on LR, all else being equal, because any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning are doubled across the two sections. Got another question here asking, does the increase in people taking the LSAT make it harder to get a good score? How does the curve work? So the raw score conversions on the LSAT, aka the curve, are not just with others taking it your same day or your same administration. It's really a rolling 3-year curve. And the increase in test takers and the recent LSAT score inflation, that has led to it being harder to get a top score, because when more people are taking it and more people are retaking it and there's more LSAT accommodations, the percentiles shift. So for example, it used to be a couple of years ago, you could get a 173 LSAT score and be in the 99th percentile. Now you've got to get a 175 to be in the 99th percentile. And so basically, scores are rising due to LSAT score accommodations, more extra time accommodations, extra breaks, more people taking it, more people retaking the LSAT since it's offered more frequently than it used to be. So all of those factors are contributing to the LSAT scores rising. And so it is harder to get a great score as a result of the increased competition and the fact that some people have extra time and others don't. And so you've just got to study more. Or if you think you could qualify for accommodations, maybe you want to seek them out as well to put yourself on an even playing field. I personally scored a 175 on the LSAT before all of this recent LSAT score inflation. Probably be harder to get a 175 now with so many people getting extra time. I did not have extra time back in the day, of course. I initially started off at a 152. Took me an entire year to get my top score of 175. And if I'd studied properly, I could have knocked it out in probably less than half the time, because ultimately the LSAT is a test of pattern recognition. If you could spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing the exam from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. Now, someone's asking about when the LSAT is removed, what will I do for work? Well, the LSAT, in a way, you could argue it already has been removed, because there are competing exams. You know, some law schools are taking the GRE, for example, instead of the LSAT. But funny thing is that even though the LSAT technically does not have a monopoly in admissions anymore, it is still the main game in town, and very, very few people are getting in with GRE scores, less than 5% of applicants. And even the new ABA data that came out a couple days ago, it showed that GRE students getting in with GRE scores dropped 25%, even though law student numbers increased. And so that decrease is actually even worse, because GRE numbers dropped at the same time law school student numbers were rising. And so basically law schools are saying, we don't love the GRE. You would expect GR numbers to increase in accordance with the number of overall law school matriculating students, but they dropped at the same time the pie was expanding, which tells us law schools do not like the GRE very much. They don't like JD Next very much. Very few people are getting in with those exams, and usually when they do, it's a special case. For the most part, even though the LSAT is not required because there are alternative exams, law schools still like the LSAT, and they use it anyway because they find it useful. Because when they are evaluating applicants with different majors from different undergrads with different life experiences, it's hard to have an apples to apples comparison across thousands of different colleges and universities with different majors. But the LSAT is a great equalizer. Regardless of background, it allows them to have a more consistent way to compare applicants. And so, although the LSAT's not technically required, everybody's pretty much still using it anyway. And so I expect there will still be people looking for help and support from me for the LSAT for the foreseeable future. And if you're looking for help, by the way, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody watching this now or later. If you'd like my support to help talk you through your plan of attack for the LSAT whenever you're taking it, you could book a free LSAT lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is in my bio on TikTok, in the description of this YouTube video, and the link below the video as well. Again, that link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Happy to help anybody out now or later if you're looking for help. That's an open offer. If you want my support, again, unpluggedprep.com/start. Link in my bio on TikTok, in the description on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube as well. Happy to talk you through your plan of attack to help you get your LSAT score up, whether you're taking it in January, February, April, or June. Jay Chong's asking, what's a top law school? That's really a matter of opinion. There are nearly 200 ABA-approved law schools. Some are better than others, of course. And if you want to look at the U.S. News Law School rankings, for example, that's one way that people typically gauge quality of school or prestige of school. The top 14 law schools are kind of like the Ivy League of law schools. You've got Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, Cornell, NYU, and so on. Those are some of the most prestigious, but oftentimes you want to balance prestige of school with scholarships you can get. Typically, you might want to go for a lower ranked law school with more scholarship money than a higher ranked school with less scholarship money. And so only you can make that choice, of course, but there's great arguments on both sides for whether to go to a higher ranked school or one with giving you more scholarships. But either way, the best way to get into better law schools, the best way to get more scholarship money is by getting a higher LSAT score. And so don't rush it, give it the time that it needs. Some people try to knock it out in just a month or so, but in reality, if you're starting from scratch, it takes at least 2 to 3 months, if not 4, to reach your fullest potential on the LSAT. And so I recommend giving it the time that it needs. If you feel like you're not going to be ready by January, maybe you want to push it back to February or even April, just to give yourself more time to reach your fullest potential. And the scored portions of the LSAT, like logical reasoning and reading comp, matter the most, but the writing sample is still important as well. Even though it's not currently scored, we can expect it will be scored in the near future. Law schools are pushing for scoring it because they can't rely on application essays as much anymore due to ChatGPT. And so, you know the writing sample matters, you know how it's changed, you know what they're looking for, but let's talk about how to actually do the writing sample, because this is where most students panic. They open up the prompt, they see a broad question like, what's the purpose of college, or should AI be regulated? And they freeze. They try to come up with some brilliant take, they second guess their argument, they start writing, they delete everything, and then they run out of time. And that is the worst case scenario. But the good news is it is completely avoidable if you have a plan. And so I'm going to walk you through the exact 5-step process we use with our students at LSAT Unplugged. This is a blueprint that you can use for any LSAT writing prompt, no matter what the topic is. Here are the 5 steps. First, you choose your side quickly. Second, you outline before you write. Third, you follow a simple structure. Fourth, you use the source material effectively. And 5, you keep it clean, concise, and readable. Each one of those steps solves a specific problem that causes students to write poorly under pressure. So let's break it down step by step. First, you want to choose your side quickly. You've got 35 minutes to write, and you can't spend 5 of those staring at the screen trying to pick a side. You've got 15 minutes to plan. Use those 15 minutes wisely. The mindset is you are not being graded on what you believe. You're being evaluated based on how well you can argue. And so you want to pick the side that has the most obvious support, the one that you can write about fast. It doesn't matter what you personally agree with. It's just a logic test. Then, second step, you outline before you write using your 15 minutes of planning. This solves the problem of having no structure. You just got to have a 5-bullet skeleton. Your thesis, 2 strong arguments in your favor, 1 counter argument, and 1 rebuttal. This skeleton holds everything up. If you don't have a skeleton, you're building it out paragraph by paragraph with no plan, and that's how you end up rambling, repeating yourself, or contradicting yourself halfway through. So take your full 15 minutes to outline. It'll save you a lot of time later when you're actually writing. Third step, you follow a simple structure. Paragraph 1 is your introduction and your thesis. Paragraph 2 is your single strongest argument. Paragraph 3, you share your second argument. Paragraph 4, you have counter arguments and rebuttals. And paragraph 5, you have a 1-sentence conclusion. That is it. You don't need a clever transition or a 5-paragraph literary masterpiece. You just need structure and logic. And this framework gives you all of that, so you never get stuck thinking, what's next? Then step 4, you use the source material effectively. This solves the problem of forgetting to reference the sources and now just freestyling. You refer to at least 2 of the provided perspectives, the source material, you name them, you quote them, you paraphrase them, then you explain how they support or oppose your argument. I'll break this down naturally in a bit, but for now, I'll just say, if you don't use the source material, you are not actually answering the question LSAC asked. And if you follow this approach, you show you can engage with the evidence, which is a core skill in law school. Then step 5, you keep it clean and concise, because you are not trying to impress them, you're trying to be understood and be clear with short sentences, clear arguments, and simple words. You want to use transition phrases like, for example, on the other hand, as source B points out, or this shows that. And you always want to save at least a few minutes at the end to reread what you wrote and fix anything confusing, because even one typo or messy sentence that could be avoided, you want to avoid it. So if you can quickly clean up at the end, that shows that you care and that you have the ability to proof what you read and what you write. And the reason this works is because most people don't prepare for the writing sample at all. So if you have any structure at all, it's going to stand out because it's going to show by comparison that your writing is clear, it's organized, and it is consistent with the rest of your application. And that's what law schools actually care about. So just follow the blueprint, and that way you won't send the red flags when everybody else does. Let's see more questions coming in. I'll get to as many as I can. Key is asking, is the tutoring actually free? Yes, so I am offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson to everybody out there watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is pinned in the chat on YouTube and on TikTok. It's the link in my bio on TikTok as well. Happy to meet with everybody out there watching this now or later. Help you make your plan of attack. No strings attached. I'm just here to help. Let's see here. Matt is asking, I got a 168 to 170 cold diagnostic test with 0 studying. How should I best study? And what should my timeline be? I'm currently in my junior year of college. So that is an awesome cold diagnostic with 0 studying. Kudos to you. That definitely shows you're capable of a top score with some proper studying, some proper support. I would say if you want to go directly from undergrad into law school, maybe you take the LSAT in April or June. You put together your application essays over the summer, then you apply the second applications open in the fall. That could be a pretty solid move. And so the question is, when will you have as much time as possible to study for the LSAT, given that you're also in college? Maybe you want to have a lighter spring semester. Maybe you want to take the summer off from other obligations to focus on your prep. I recommend a 5-phase approach to LSAT prep. I use the LASER approach. LASER is an acronym standing for learning, accuracy, sections, exams, and review. Learning is building a strong foundation in the different sections, the different question types. A is drill for accuracy, drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each type. S is for individual sections to work on your pacing. E is for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests. And R is for review, too often neglected but incredibly important in order to make sure that you are understanding why you're making mistakes so that you can avoid them next time around. And For those who have ADHD, I always recommend seeking out accommodations to get extra time, extra breaks, and we can, of course, adjust your study plan accordingly to account for that. When you have extra time, what that means is test day becomes longer, and so endurance becomes more important because test day goes from being 2.5 hours to being roughly 4 hours or 5 or 6 hours even. And so you want to take more timed exams when possible. So test day feels natural, like you've done it all before. The thing is that each sitting becomes longer, and so it's harder to fit in quite as many tests, which means that maybe you want to have a longer time frame to get more tests under your belt. But we have a lot of experience working with students who have ADHD or testing anxiety, and we can definitely help you out with a custom plan of attack. By the way, folks, I do these free live streams and classes every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. And so if you're finding this helpful, please spread the word, share this on your socials, double tap for liking it. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these, and the algorithm doesn't really boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so I really appreciate your support. Spreading the word, it means a lot to me. I appreciate it. H is asking, after transitioning from full sections, is 3 to 4 weeks of full practice tests good? I would say yeah. All else being equal, the answer is yes. I think that a month of full exams is pretty good. It all depends on your time frame, though. So, I'm curious. H, when are you taking the LSAT? If you're now entering your final 3 weeks before the LSAT in January, for example, that is awesome. If you haven't yet had the chance to build a strong foundation and your LSAT's only 3 weeks away, you might consider pushing back your LSAT to a later date. Or maybe you'll only be able to have 1 or 2 weeks of full exams. We got to balance the ideal schedule versus the hard reality of what your study plan's actually like when your LSAT's actually coming up. I see Matthew asking about the wrong answer journal. I'm a big fan of wrong answer journals. We recommend them in our programs. I actually did a live about a week ago, last Wednesday, I think it was, solely on wrong answer journals. So click the live tab on my YouTube channel and you'll be able to go back through the recordings and videos and see my in-depth thoughts on wrong answer journals there. But we incorporate those as part of the Socratic review method because you've got to document your mistakes in order to avoid making the same mistakes again. And you got to collect the data. And so the wrong answer journal or mistake journal, whatever you want to call it, it's a great way to do that. It could be a Google Doc, a Google Sheet, a physical notebook, doesn't really matter. We share templates in our programs for our students, though, and we give them feedback to improve the documentation. Scanning through here for more questions in case I missed anything. Let's see here. Young King is asking, do I think those with a STEM background do better on the LSAT? Well, the data shows that the people with the highest LSAT scores are typically, I think, philosophy majors, physics majors, comp sci majors actually do better on the LSAT, all else being equal, than people with majors in pre-law, which is maybe kind of surprising. You could major in literally anything and go to law school, and there's an open question of whether majoring in a particular subject causes you to do better on the LSAT, or maybe people who have a particular major are already predisposed to do better on the LSAT. If you wanted to choose a major without regard to anything other than getting into the best law school possible, you'd want to choose one that gets you a high GPA, because law schools don't care what your major is, but they want to, of course, take applicants with the highest possible GPAs to boost their standings in the US News rankings. And so you might want to just get easy A's. Young Money saying, just wanted to say hi, watching your vids got me to a T14. Amazing. Congrats, Young Money. That's an awesome outcome. Really glad the videos helped. If you got a 170 plus, reach out. We're always looking for fantastic coaches who used our resources. So if you want to shoot me a DM or an email, I'm happy to take next steps there. But awesome. Congrats on the T14 admissions. That's amazing. Got someone asking me, did I go to law school? No, I actually didn't. I was considering law school, of course, because nobody does the LSAT just for fun. I majored in political science, though I was going to go to law school, got my 175. And after I did, my friends in college started asking me for help because they were going to law school also. So I started teaching them as well. They would buy me dinner or coffee, and we'd sit down and do some problems together. And then the friends of friends were asking for help, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And then it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I could apply to law school, or I could just keep teaching the LSAT, and I enjoy what I'm doing now. So let's see where this goes. And 20 years later, here I am still teaching the LSAT, and I love it. I think I love law school as well, but I couldn't do law school and this because law school is pretty taxing and it's time consuming. And I've got a family, I've got young kids. And so between teaching LSAT and having my family, I don't think I have time for anything additional. But maybe one day, who knows? I think it'd be fun. But in the meantime, I get to live vicariously through all of you, and hearing what law school is like is pretty interesting, it seems. Excuse me. So H is asking, if I've had 5 months of section exposure and timing, is 3 to 4 weeks of full exams good? I would say probably. I'd recommend ideally 1 or 2 exams a week. If you could do more, that's great, but I don't want you to burn out, and I want you to have adequate time to review your exams that you're taking as well. So it's all about striking that balance, but I think 1 or 2 exams a week is probably enough. And if you're taking it in January, I think you've got roughly 3 weeks from now. If hopefully your schedule is pretty light during the holiday season, so you can go a bit harder at this and knock it out in January and apply this cycle. And by the way, for those who are wondering, the January LSAT's not too late. Neither is February, by the way. Cool. All right, so I'm going to share a bit more on the writing sample here. Starting with step 1, you want to choose your side quickly, and you never want to look back because you've got limited time, right? And so the first 15 minutes are your planning period. You don't want to overthink. You don't want to second guess. You don't want to read the sources over 3 times. You just want to pick one side arbitrarily even. There is no best side to pick with the writing sample. It's not a moral debate. You are being evaluated here on your ability to take a position and defend it logically. That is it. And so your first job is to pick a side that you can argue quickly, clearly, and with as little resistance as possible. So first, you pick the side ideally with the most ammo, not the one you agree with. You don't have to pick the side you believe in, even if you can't support it really well. Belief is irrelevant here. It is all about the strategy. So you look at the source blurbs and you ask yourself, which side has more concrete arguments? Which side has at least 2 usable perspectives? Which one could I explain in 1 sentence to a friend? That is the side you take. Think about it like you are a trial lawyer. You are not here to express your truth. You are here to win the argument with the clearest case. And you don't want to try to be original. You want to try to be clear. No one is expecting you to come up with a brand new take on the topic. Your goal is not to be profound. If the prompt's about whether college should focus on liberal arts or career prep, and the sources appear to be stacked with reasons supporting career prep, you pick that, even if it feels boring, or even if you personally love philosophy classes. You are not being rewarded for creativity. You are being rewarded for structure and logic. So don't make it harder than it needs to be. Go where the evidence points. Then you scan the sources once and you make your decision fast. You should spend no more than a minute choosing your position. You are not trying to fully understand every nuance in the source material yet. You've just got to have a quick mental tally. For example, can I think of 2 arguments in support? Can I respond to the other side in 1 paragraph? And are there at least 2 perspectives I can reference? If the answer to those questions is yes, you lock in that side. You write your thesis at the top of your scratch paper, you underline it, you circle it, and you commit. Because once you've made that call, you are done thinking about it. And you are not allowed to flip sides halfway through the essay. It would make you look indecisive and lead to a jumbled, contradictory mess. You also want to choose the side that lets you move the fastest, because the best argument is the one you can write fast given limited time. Even if the other side seems more sophisticated, if it would take you too long to set up, you want to skip it. Your goal is to deliver a structured, supported argument under pressure. And if both sides seem equal, you pick the one with the stronger counter-argument because that gives you more to work with later in the essay. Law schools want to see that you can acknowledge the other side and respond like a mature adult. So if one side makes it easier to do that, you take that opportunity. And then you commit. Your mindset should be, this is my case, and I'm going to win it. You're not leaving the door open for second guessing. You don't want to squeeze in points from the other side to sound balanced because that's only going to water down your argument. Instead, you make your case clearly, you own your position, and you back it up with sources because you have limited time. And once you master this idea, the rest of the essay gets that much easier because you're not stuck in your own head. You are only building forward. Then the second step is you outline before you write. And that outline only takes you 2 to 3 minutes, but it sets you apart because nobody else does it. A few minutes up front will keep your essay from falling apart later. Your outline should include your thesis statement, your first supporting point, which is the strongest argument, the second supporting point with a different angle, the counter argument, and the rebuttal, which is where you're showing why your position still holds up even if the counter argument is a valid point. And then finally, you close off with a conclusion idea if you think you'll have the time. And your outline could be bullet points, shorthand, or notes. What matters is that the outline gives you structure so that when you start writing the actual essay, you're not improvising, you're just filling in the blanks. Then you use the sources when you're writing the actual essay. So you want to map each source to a particular point. So for example, your first point, your strongest argument, maps to source A. Your second point maps to source B. Then the counter argument maps to source C. If you outline this up front, it's a huge time saver when you're writing the full essay because you've already mapped out where the quotes go and where the paraphrases go. And this saves you from the biggest mistake on writing sample, which is that you run out of time halfway through paragraph 3. If you outline, it forces you to think about your pacing up front because you see if your argument's getting too long or too scattered, you can adjust it and speed up to later sections of the essay before you actually start writing. And remember, it's not about perfection. You're not building a detailed blueprint. You're writing 5 or 6 bullet points, maybe 7, just to let you know what each paragraph going forward is going to be about. And this helps you stay structured under pressure because you are including every single point. Intro, first point, second point, counter, rebuttal, conclusion. That's it. And if the prompt feels overwhelming, you write your thesis statement first to give you a clear sense of where you're going to take it, and you have your outline mapped out for what you're going to do, where you're going to take the essay. And you could write just one sentence for each paragraph and expand each one little by little to keep you moving forward, make sure that you don't miss anything. Now, when it comes to structure, what you want to do is keep a 4 or 5 paragraph structure. Again, paragraph 1 is the introduction. You restate the issue in your own words. You clearly declare your thesis. That is it. You are not yet explaining anything. You're not even diving into the sources. You are just setting the stage. Then paragraph 2, again, is your strongest argument. That is your anchor. You lead with the most persuasive, evidence-backed point supporting your position. That paragraph should have a topic sentence that previews your point, 1 or 2 sentences explaining why that point matters, a quote or a paraphrase from one of the sources, and a line or 2 explaining how that source supports your position. That's it, just 5 sentences max. Then paragraph 3 is your second supporting argument, same level of quality, but from a different angle. Same structure though, topic sentence, explanation, source reference, and you link it back to your thesis. Then in paragraph 4, you address the other side and you rebut it. This is your counter argument paragraph. And law schools love to see this because it shows that you can think critically and handle disagreement with maturity. And so for paragraph 4, you state the opposing view as fairly and as clearly as you can. Then you quote or paraphrase the source that supports it. You acknowledge why someone might believe that, and then you calmly explain why your position still holds up. Remember that you are not trying to destroy the other side. You're showing that you considered it, but you still chose yours for a good reason. And then finally, you have the conclusion. And the conclusion is optional, by the way, not absolutely necessary. But if you have time, you could write a quick final paragraph to wrap things up, just 1 or 2 sentences that reaffirm your thesis and they tie the whole thing together. But do not start writing this if you are pressed for time. It would be better to polish the rest of the essay than to rush through a conclusion that you don't really need. Now, the reason this sort of structure works for writing samples is because you are writing under pressure. So this is not the time to get creative. You don't have time to reinvent the wheel. But when you have a consistent structure, you give the reader what they want in the order they expect it. And when your essay is organized like this, It feels more professional, even if your writing is not perfect. No one is grading you on flair or creativity. They are evaluating how well you can think, organize, and communicate under time limits. And if you want help staying on track while you write, here's some tips. First, you glance back at your outline between paragraphs because that keeps you focused. And if you find that a paragraph is starting to sprawl, you go back to your point or you move on to the next section and think through it one paragraph at a time. And once you master this structure, writing becomes a simple, straightforward checklist. Again, it's not a creative project. Now, I've got some questions coming in here in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can in the time remaining. I see Key is saying, I'm scared about tutoring because I feel like it won't work for me. Well, let's think about best case, worst case scenarios. When I look at a student who's looking for a score increase, I always think to myself, what would maximize the likelihood that a student could achieve that score increase? Are they more or less likely to improve with additional support? I think all else being equal, more support is going to help. Not saying it's the right path forward for everybody. There are a lot of different kinds of support and study methods out there. You've got one-on-one coaching, of course. You've got live small group classes. You've got live larger group classes. You've got on-demand courses. You've got textbooks. You've got practice questions. All of them have their place. You got to think about what kind of learner you are. Do you learn best studying solo? Do you learn best watching webinars or videos? Do you learn best in a classroom environment, but more intimate, like a lecture, like a discussion section, for example, a seminar? Or do you like private one-on-one support? And if there is a method you have already tried before and it hasn't worked for you, doesn't mean you're bad at the LSAT, just means that particular method or that particular resource might not be what you need to unlock your potential. And so think through what other resources, what other support you have not yet taken advantage of that might be able to help you. And if tutoring didn't work for you before, maybe it wasn't tutoring, maybe it was just that individual. So you don't want to let a bad decision burn you twice, right? Maybe tutoring could work for you, but that particular individual did not work for you. So try out multiple resources, seek out support. Again, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there. And so there's really no stakes other than the time that you invest in the call. And so if you want to meet with me, if you're finding these live stream classes helpful, if you want to talk through your situation with me personally, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons to everybody out there watching this now or later. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, and in my bio on TikTok as well. I'm happy to help out anybody watching this now or later and help you talk through your situation and help you figure out a plan of attack for you whenever you're taking the LSAT. Whether it's January, February, April, or June, I'm happy to help. Key's asking, do you think I would benefit if I scored a 167 and 161 untimed? I mean, unless you've already locked in a 180 timed officially, there's always room for improvement, right? And so untimed scores, I don't place that much stock in them, to be frank, just because test day is timed, right? So you could get a 180 untimed and get a 160 timed for all I know, right? So untimed with unlimited timing, because test day is under time constraints, it's an apples and oranges comparison. If you told me you got a 167 timed strictly with real world conditions, that might translate to a 163 officially, because students often drop a couple points from the practice to the actual timed due to the stress of the actual day, nerves and anxiety, bad proctored, tech issues, what have you. So we typically want to have a buffer. If your goal was a 170 official, I'd want you to have ideally a 175 practice test average going in, just to have that buffer. But I think that most students could benefit from getting some kind of personal support and feedback from someone who has experience teaching the LSAT. And so if you're looking for some third-party objective feedback on your study program and situation, you want help mapping out your plan of attack, I'm happy to help for free. You just got to book the call with me. And that's an open offer to everybody watching this now or later, by the way. Ada's asking, how would a 349 GPA and a 178 LSAT do with T14 admissions? So congrats on the 178 LSAT. Assuming that's an official score that you've achieved, that's an incredible result. Definitely puts you in the strong as a strong contender for T14 admissions. The 349 GPA is below median, though. The T14 GPA medians are basically all in the 3.9 range. The lowest is 3.88, but most of them are 3.9 plus. And so you ideally want to be above 3.9 to maximize your odds. If you're below on the GPA, makes you a splitter. We balance that with a higher LSAT. So you could still get into some T14s. I would blanket the T14 if I were you. If you want to go to a top school, just apply to every single one. And then, of course, apply to some outside the T14 as well, just to maximize your outcomes and have more scholarship negotiation leverage. Got a question here from Reki asking, I'm taking it in June, and I've been working on myself to improve my score. What do you think? Okay, so you're taking it in June. You've got roughly 5.5 months or so. That's plenty of time to get a top score, even if you were starting from scratch. And so I'm happy to meet with you again. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start, pinned in the chat, in the description, in my bio. I'm happy to meet with you personally and talk you through your plan of attack to help you reach your goals. I think that the sky's the limit when you've got 5 months and change. And you could take it in June. You would then have a later LSAT like August as a backup, and you could still apply to law school. The second application's open in the fall. So I think that's a great time frame. I wish that more folks planned ahead like you are. Just scanning through the chat here for other questions coming in. Caitlin says, hey. Hey, Caitlin, welcome. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I'll get to as many as I can. And by the way, folks, I see a lot of folks are asking me, like, I got this GPA and this LSAT. Where could I go to law school? What are my odds? I mean, rather than me just kind of riffing on medians, because there's nearly 200 law schools. I don't know all of their exact medians off the top of my head. Too much to memorize, and they're always changing. The new ABA 509 reports actually just came out earlier this week, and so you could see fairly up-to-date data directly on the American Bar Association's website. You just Google, for example, Harvard ABA 509 or Yale ABA 509, and you will be able to see the exact LSAT and GPA medians for every single ABA-approved law school in the country, and that will give you a sense of where your stats stack up. So if you have, I see that, for example, one person leaving a comment, a Cyclone said they had a 3.8 GPA, 166 LSAT, where could you go? Cyclone, you can look that up. You can see, okay, well, I'm above GPA median for this school, but below the LSAT median, so I want to retake the LSAT, for example. Or maybe your numbers are above median, both LSAT and GPA, and so you're likely to get in, maybe even with scholarship money. And so that puts you in a pretty strong position, but you'll be able to look at the data directly yourself and calculate your chances. LSAC actually has an LSAT GPA calculator where you can input different GPAs and LSATs to see your chances at various schools. Pretty useful tool. Reki's saying, my highest score is a 130, to be honest, and I haven't found a strict study schedule. Okay, so if you're at a 130, I'm assuming that you want to improve by quite a bit, maybe even 30, 40 points or more. So having a strict study schedule is going to be key. One thing we do for our students that I found really impactful for them is to create a personal study schedule, mapping out exactly what to do every single day from now till the test. And we personalize it to your life, your other obligations, your weak areas, and your plan of attack. And so if you want to talk through your personal situation, I'll give you some guidance on your study schedule. Open offer to everybody watching this now or later. You could book that free LSAT lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. I'll be happy to help. Allie's saying, I used your course last year and I just finished my first semester of law school. Good luck all. Awesome, Allie. I'm so glad to hear that the course was helpful. Congrats on finishing your first semester. Hope you enjoy a well-deserved break over the holidays. And then you come back to the second semester feeling pretty refreshed. That's awesome. Always love the success stories. Caitlin's asking, I'm graduating from undergrad in May, but never had any internships or regular jobs. Is it still possible to get into law school? So Caitlin, the good news is yes. There are so-called KJD applicants, meaning that you're going directly from kindergarten to getting a JD with no work experience, totally fine. Law schools will not look down on that. Hopefully you've had some volunteer work or some extracurriculars to at least show what you like to do outside of academics, but that's totally fine. Law school admissions is unlike undergrad admissions because they don't care as much about the resume. It's more focused on your LSAT score first, number one. Secondly, your GPA. And then distant third is everything else, like application essays, work experience, resume, letters of rec, interviews, and all of that. But you still can get in. The key is going to be better GPA, better LSAT. And if you're graduating undergrad at the end of next semester, your GPA is fairly fixed. You're not going to be able to radically change it. But your LSAT score, of course, you can improve significantly. So I would recommend that you focus your efforts there. Kipopalicious is asking, I don't plan on applying to law school till 2027. If I take the LSAT now, will I have to retake it? Good news is, no, you won't have to retake it because LSAT scores are valid for 5 years. So you could take the LSAT in 2026 and apply to law school in 2027, and your score is still valid and still good. I would say look at your life and your schedule over the next year or so and see where will you have a few months at least where that are relatively lighter so that you can devote more time to your LSAT prep then. Ryan is asking, do you think an applicant with a 145 LSAT can get into a lower ranked school like Charleston? Maybe, but I'm going to be honest, and this might sound a bit harsh, but I don't think it's worth going to any law school that would take you with a 145 LSAT. Maybe there are some low-ranked or unaccredited law schools that would accept you, but you would be overpaying, in my opinion. They're not going to give you scholarship money, most likely. So if you're going to pay a sticker price, like tens of thousands of dollars, to go to a low-ranked law school that probably has pretty bad reputation, pretty bad bar passage rates, pretty bad employment outcomes, I wouldn't do it. I just would not do it unless you're going to work at your parents' law firm and no one's going to care where you went to law school and you don't mind paying out of pocket full tuition. For the most students in this position, I would say just get a higher LSAT. Bill is asking, what about 155 LSAT? So of course, 155, much better than 145, but my counter is, why not 165? 165 I feel good about. Like 165, I feel like it's not perfect, of course, not top 5% even, but still good enough that some good law schools will take you with scholarship money on top of that. And of course, GPA is a factor as well, but even if you have a 4.0 GPA with a 145 LSAT, you're not going to get into great law schools, to be frank. I would say just study more, retake the LSAT, get a higher score going in. And you have many, many opportunities to take the LSAT. It's offered 8 times a year, so nearly every month. Coming up, we've got January, February, April, and June as upcoming LSAT administrations. LSAC has not released the LSAT test dates for the coming year beyond June, but this past year, if it's any reference, they were August, September, October, November, 4 consecutive months. And so there are many, many chances for you to retake the LSAT, get a higher score, apply with stronger numbers to boost your odds. I mean, if you look at it, your LSAT score is the easiest money you'll ever get because it'll get into better law schools, get you more scholarship money, and it will set the trajectory for the rest of your legal career. So I highly recommend giving it the attention it deserves given its relative importance. So I would retake if you can. Aiden's saying, I got a 155 in June, then a 162 in August. Is that big jump up a good look? Absolutely, that's a great look. I mean, think of the counter. If your score went down, would that look good? Not really. It wouldn't hurt you though, because law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score on record. And so if you're like Aiden, 155 followed by 162, the 162 is what counts. And if it had been the flip where he got a 162 followed by 155, 162 is still what counts. And so basically, there is no downside to retaking the LSAT. Because if you do better, great. If you do worse or stay the same, no big deal. Highest score is still what counts. And so for this reason, I recommend that everybody retake the LSAT at least once because there is no downside other than the $220 or whatever it is to LSAC to take the LSAT again, another month of studying. But that additional month of studying could be as little as just taking one practice test a week, reviewing it in depth, and that's it. And by the way, folks, I offer these free live stream classes and Q&As every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. If you don't tell anybody, just kidding. But please share it on your socials, share it in your WhatsApp groups, your Discord channels, Reddit, wherever you talk to others studying for the LSAT. I really appreciate your support. And if you want to book that free LSAT lesson with me, the link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Link in my bio on TikTok, in the description on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube. I'll see you all on Monday, same time, same place. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.